If you haven't connected with me before, please do connect with me on socials. You can see here my LinkedIn. Please also ensure you are following Bravery in the Boardroom. We always release information there. And I know a number of you, that's why you're here today, because you have seen it on our channels. Nikki, shall we click on? For everyone joining us, please, it's wonderful. Hi, Sherilyn, how are you doing? Really good to see you here. Do let us know where you're joining from. Always, I know we're expecting people from far and wide across the country today. Surjit, you're most welcome as well. The session is being recorded. We also have a number of colleagues who couldn't make the session live today, but are really keen to hear what our panelists have to say. You're most welcome, Saeed, as a first-time attendee too. The best visual and experience for this, Pam, good to see you in the chat. Best audio for this is if you get prompted to put your audio in, please do that. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear me. If you go to the top right-hand corner on Zoom, you can select your view. Speaker view is the best view for you today. We will be spotlighting the panel when they come on. It will give you the best experience. If you go to the top right of your Zoom, click on view and select speaker view, that will be the best view and experience for you. I encourage you to interact in the chat. Let me know what you're thinking. Nikki will also ask you to submit your questions there for us as well. And I'd like to hear your reflections as you're listening too. Ifat, really good to see you here as well. Okay, today we've got a busy agenda. Okay, I always promise that we will finish on time. All right. So Nikki, can you take me to the agenda? Next slide, please. Okay, this webinar has been set up specially to celebrate South Asian Heritage Month, to really recognize and celebrate the wealth of leadership that we see of South Asian heritage. We're seeing more and more come through in the NHS in particular, but not enough. We'll see on the data. We still have disparity, a lot of disparity between the number of people from ethnically diverse backgrounds across the NHS versus the numbers we see in leadership, particularly executive leadership. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. We'll have our panel discussion. Please do have your questions ready. Really good to see you, Rishi, here today as well. And then we'll have time for your questions, okay? Some of you have sent questions in advance. Really appreciate that, really appreciate it. You're not late, Callie, it's absolutely fine. You can just join. People are busy, you join when you can. Before we go, I will also tell you a bit about the APNA conference that's happening later on this year. If you haven't been to the APNA conference before, it is a must, okay? I'll tell you more about that. And just to touch on some of the Bravery in the Boardroom support and resources that are available to you now that you can access to, okay? Nikki, shall we click on? So, as I said, it is South Asian Heritage Month this month. The theme for this year is Roots to Roots, okay? We'll be sending you some more information. So something I should have also said, when I said the session is being recorded, also to let you know, the recording link will be sent to everybody who's registered to attend today, okay? So you'll receive a copy of the recording. When we send that out, we'll also be, Benita from the South Asian Heritage Month team will kindly be sharing some more information with us. For me, awareness months, heritage months and days are really important. Now, we can all argue the point that actually we shouldn't need a heritage month to actually have a focus on ensuring, where we work and how we look after people if we're providing care and support is inclusive, and that we should always have a focus on reducing inequalities and seeing representation across leadership at all levels. However, when we do have Heritage Month and Awareness Days, it gives us the opportunity to remind of those points, to celebrate. So I see it as an opportunity as well to celebrate the wonderful leadership and experience and expertise that we have from South Asian cultural heritage. And we see that in our panel today. So the 5 pillars, if you like, of South Asian Heritage Month is to honour the cultural journeys across generations, to explore stories of identity and belonging. I always love to hear from first generation, their stories. They're inspiring. And a term I use is we stand on the shoulder of those giants, those who came before us, right? Really important to acknowledge that. To celebrate traditions. We are who we are, and we talk a lot about authentic leadership. when we're thinking about progressing into spaces when we're underrepresented. And for some colleagues, it doesn't feel safe enough to show up as who you really are, to show and showcase some of your cultural background and heritage. I understand that. I really advocate, though, that we should be able to do that. And I hope that we can pave the way for those coming behind us to connect heritage to modern day impact and leadership. Well, I hope that's what this conversation is about today. And I know to share your story. So using that hashtag this month, Roots to Roots, for those of you who are on social media, for those of you who are on the call today of South Asian heritage, I really hope it encourages you to share your story, whether that is online or whether that is with colleagues. I think it's really important to hear that. And I'll be asking the panel today about their stories and journeys of how they've got into the boardroom. Nikki, shall we click on? So APNA, what would I like to say now? Asma, when I bring you in onto the panel, you may want to say a little more as co-chair, but APNA is something that's close to my heart because when I started Bravery in the Boardroom 3 years ago, Bal Clare, who's one of the founding members of APNA, was one of the first NHS board members to say yes to me, to come onto one of these roundtable conversations. He also promoted Bravery in the Boardroom vastly in the APNA groups. And we had so many people join that first session. He really backed this and believed in it. And I can't thank him enough. I've also had the pleasure of being invited to the APNA conference where we were given the showcase, the plenary panel, the showcase panel that we were given at the conference to hold a live Bravery in the Boardroom session. And Bimal, who's with us today, joined me on that panel. But the importance of having a network that is for people from the same cultural background, the breadth of membership that APNA has, absolutely phenomenal. It's a trailblazing network in terms of where it started. So that starting point of the founding members many years ago to where it is now having a year-on-year conference that I believe is sold out year-on-year, the APNA Awards, really wonderful. We sponsored one of the awards and the wonder, the joy that you see in celebrating what people have achieved. But most importantly, the political power and influence, the ability to influence policy when you have a large, active leadership network, really flying the flag, driving change, and lobbying for change in policies. Absolutely powerful. And it's something we can't do on our own. It's why I call Bravery in the Boardroom a movement. It's why I have a lot of belief in networks like APNA. And it's why I'm really grateful to be partnering with them today. Okay, so Asma, when I call you in, if there's anything you want to add when we're doing the Q&A, please do say so. Nikki, shall we click on? So before we get into the conversation, the latest round of res data came out last month. So hot off the press, we have this information. And what are we seeing here? So these are just the key headlines. I know we've got a number of colleagues in the audience who regularly are EDI leads, are HR leads with responsibility, our inclusion and belonging leads, people holding direct responsibility, as well as having board members here who are responsible for moving racial equity and reducing discrimination and inequalities in their organizations. You will be very familiar with the res data and what your trust data is showing you. For anyone on the call who is working in an NHS organization and you haven't seen your own res data, please ask to see it. Have a look at it and see what it's showing you. But here's just some snapshot information from the most recent res report. We've seen a slight increase in the number of staff in the NHS. And I use BME because this is the language that's used in the res report. So we're seeing just under 30% of staff in the NHS are now identify as being from a BME background. We see disparity straight away in the number of board members, the percentage of board members who are from a BME background. We've seen a 1% increase, but we still see there a very clear 12% gap, okay, to reach equity. When we filter that down again to executive board members, so if we strip out the non-exec members, then we see that that number drops, okay? So just under 12% of executive board members are from a BME background. So in all regions, there is a lower proportion of BME people on boards compared to the proportion of staff across the piece. No surprises there. I think we all know that, but I like to use it to set the context of what we're talking about. And in London, so I had a 20-year career in the NHS prior to stepping out into this world. All of my NHS career was in London. I'm London born and bred. In London, we are now seeing over 50% of the workforce identifies as being from a BME background, okay? So it's got the largest disparity when we look at board membership. So that just sets the tone for us in terms of why we are focused and why I am determined to see boardrooms more representative of the communities and staff they serve. Now, what I would like to do is stop talking. Ask Nikki to, if she could take the slides down for me. And if I could invite our panelists to join me. So if I could ask you to put your camera on and come off mute and join me. And Nikki will do her magic behind the scenes to spotlight you. So you will be here with me. Okay. Okay. So without further ado, I would like to say good afternoon and welcome. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourself and I'm going to work my way around my screen. Okay, so good afternoon, Bimal. Would you like to introduce yourself? Hi.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Bimal Patel. I'm the Chief Finance Officer at London North West.
Thank you so much. And Asma, hello. Let me let you get from you.
Hi, I'm Asma Nafees. I'm a non-executive director on the board of Derbyshire Community Hospitals and also Deputy COO for Ordnance CSU.
And you're also the co-chair of APNA.
I'm the co-chair of APNA.
Amongst other things. Asma, you're most welcome. And good afternoon, Salma.
Hi, I'm Salma Yasmeen. I'm the Chief Executive at Sheffield Health and Social Care Trust, and wonderful to be here as part of this conversation.
Thank you, Salma. And last but not least, Sal, good afternoon.
Hello and good afternoon. Hi everyone, my name is Sal Uka. I am the Interim Medical Director here in Airedale over in sunny West Yorkshire.
Okay, and Sal, I'm going to stay with you first and foremost, if I may, and just ask you to summarize that journey into the boardroom at Airedale. Can you just summarize for us your journey so far and what helped you to get there?
Sure, yeah, no problem. So it's great to be here and it's great to be sat alongside, even in a kind of a virtual sense, with some really great and inspirational colleagues, including yourself, Monique, who I know you pretty well. I'm a paediatrician by background, so I trained in and around West Yorkshire, graduated from Leeds, decided to kind of make my home in West Yorkshire, and went through the usual postgraduate training that you kind of go through if you're kind of going down specialist training. I became a consultant back in 2008 and fairly soon had ambitions to kind of think about how I might want to kind of keep furthering myself. How do I kind of keep that stretch? It's something that's really important to me, is that actually how do I keeping that drive, that ambition, and how do I keep myself kind of, with skin in the game in that sense, really. I like a good challenge. I like to be challenged, it has to be said. And I think, over time, some of it is about putting your hand up. Being seen to be sort of someone that actually you are willing to go over and above what you do on a day-to-day basis. And that's not necessarily easy to do because it's the juggle with your career, being a doctor in my case, or it's a career, challenge with your family and your friends and all those other bits that you're going to think, well, how do you juggle that? And I think over the years, it's kind of being steadfast to your ambition. And I'll go into more of that, I think, over the course of the next kind of 60 minutes or so. But I think what's really important is that actually you have an understanding of yourself and where you want to get to. And I think being kind of steadfast to that, having some tenacity, being brave, really, really important.
Thank you. I'm coming back to you, right? There's some things that I'd really love to unpack there. Salma, may I come to you? So Salma, I always describe you as a trailblazer, no pressure, right? But I know you're 2 years into your CEO role now, which is absolutely fantastic. But it'd be really great for our audience to learn a little bit more about you, your journey to the boardroom and holding the top job and what helped you to get there.
Thank you, Monique. And of course, here's where I'm going to disclose my age, but I have been in the game for over 30 years now, and it started as a mental health nurse. That was motivated and inspired by a maternal aunt who had had experiences of mental health issues. And over the last 3 decades, I've held a number of senior roles, both in Yorkshire and in London and internationally. And one of them even included establishing a pioneering voluntary and community sector organisation in inner city Bradford many years ago. But all of those different roles that I've held over the last 3 decades essentially have taken me from frontline clinical care delivery to developing policy, implementing policy, but also system transformation. And that is what has got me into the role that I'm in today. What has helped me along the way? Lots of different things, but I think the thing that probably anchors me absolutely the most is being rooted in my values of inclusion, equity, knowing that we can make care and services better for the people that we serve. Really crystallising my values and using those to anchor me, particularly at times of challenge and change. The second thing that's really helped me along the way is wonderful colleagues, and colleagues like you, Monique, who I met several years ago when we were doing a similar role. Lots of conversations and reflections together. But I encourage people, build your allies and build your trusted network. That includes a mentor and a coach, and I encourage all my colleagues in my current trust even to do that. And that's incredibly helpful, both in terms of your own personal resiliency and well-being, but a good mentor and a coach can help you to see the best of you as well as all that needs to continue to improve. But they are the most crucial when the stakes are really high. And in this role, often it does feel like the stakes are incredibly high because you are accountable for several thousand people and their well-being who are in your workforce, and absolutely every delivery of care. As a diverse woman in a leadership role, I've, like many of the colleagues on this call, had to navigate visible and invisible barriers, internal and external barriers. And again, I think what helps me to do that at times of challenge, or when perhaps definitions of leadership are different to that of what I might present, I think what I've learned is that actually my authenticity is my strength. That is that helps me navigate those moments. So that's something that I've continued to harness and work on and continue to work on even today.
Thank you so much, Salma. And I think I'm sure we'll get some questions around showing up authentically and the bravery to do that, because I think it usually comes up from our audience about how you do that. So we'll probe into that a little bit more. But I always say it, and it's so true. I mean, it's true for all of you, but Salma, your story is extremely inspirational about what's driven you and to get there and to say yes, right? Because sometimes we talk a lot about progression, but we don't often talk about the fear of success. So actually when that big opportunity is in front of you, the bravery to be able to say yes and step into it is no mean feat, right? So just being honest about that as well. So thank you very much. Bimal, may I come to you? So you are one of very few chief financial officers from an ethnically diverse background across the whole NHS. So I know our audience will want to know a lot more about how you got there.
Sure, thanks, Monique. Again, pleasure to be here, especially during South Asian Heritage Month.
Yeah.
Bit like Salma, I've been in the NHS a while. I've been in the NHS 25 years. And I'm actually really fortunate to be in the trust that I'm in, and all the trusts that I've worked in actually, that have been very diverse in population, because I work in London effectively. I do work in a trust in Northwest London, basically within, and they've got 4 hospitals, one in Harrow, one in Brent, and one in Ealing. Definitely diverse backgrounds, and the 4th is St Mark's, which is actually a national hospital for colorectal surgery. So I've been really fortunate to do that role, and actually I've come back into London Northwest, where I was deputy CFO many years ago, and it feels like unfinished business coming back. So it's been great for me. I started out actually as an information analyst, so it's strange how people's careers start actually, especially in finance. When you think about where you might have started, I was actually just covering someone's maternity leave, the advert was placed in a local newspaper. I remember that. Yes, and that's how people used to apply for jobs back when I was a young lad. Most of my career has been spent in provider trusts, like I said, West Middlesex, just around northwest and northwest London, and I've also done an ICB CFO role, which gave me a real system-wide approach. I think what I would say is that, and I'll come on to this probably a bit later, changing roles was really helpful for me, and changing organisations and being in different sectors around the NHS really helped widen my perspective, and also see populations very differently.
Mm-hmm.
My background is that I'm a British Indian. I was born in West London. I speak fairly fluent Gujarati, which comes in handy when I'm in Harrow walking the corridors, when I see patients and visitors and staff who are probably moaning and whinging about the care sometimes, but generally just gossiping. It's always brings a smile to my face because I recognise what they're saying. What had helped me in my career, I think some of these things have already been said, but people that kind of vouch for you. I had managers, I had CFOs, CEOs in my career that looked out for me in terms of training development, and they did that because I delivered. So there's nothing was given to me, and I had a really strong network, and I still have a very strong network of people around me that helps in future careers. And I'd say networking is really crucial for me. And then some of the things that I learned over a number of training development programs, and when you want to be a CFO, there are a number of programs that do take place in the NHS. And one of the things that I did that I was really proud of actually finishing was an IBEVN program. That was one of the best programs I probably did. But actually, I met a multitude of people from different backgrounds and also different job roles. And so that was excellent. So yeah, they're the sort of things that helped me get where I am. But I always try to challenge myself in everything that I do.
And a common theme I hear across you all is about breadth. So breadth of experience as well. So not just the linear conversation, but thinking about breadth. Hearing what you were saying there, Bimal, about different organizations as well. And also what the exposure that gives you. The commonality, it doesn't matter if you're repeating, because that kind of validates those insights, doesn't it, about mentors, sponsors, and in particular, what I'm hearing here is about the advocacy part of sponsorship. So having that there for you as well. Asma, may I come to you? Because you have a extremely, I remember when I spoke to you before, I kind of was counting on my fingers the different roles that you hold in your portfolio. It'd be great for everyone to hear more about those.
So my journey into the NHS was quite unconventional in that I started as a commercial solicitor in private practice. Thought I had my entire career path mapped out, and then I transitioned into the NHS following redundancy as a solicitor in the 2008-2009 recession. I always had a plan to go back to the law, but I've stayed in the NHS because I wanted to make a difference. And I'd found a niche that brought together the triangulation between contracting, finance, and analytics. And over the years, I've held senior operational and transformation roles. My rise in operational roles largely came from being given the difficult areas for the organisations that I worked in to tackle, and then being moved on or having opportunities to do some of those stretch. And part of that is the allyship and the sponsorship within organisations. But what I found is once I got to that sub C-suite level, I hit that glass ceiling that many of us will be encountering along the way. So I was applying for roles, being told that I didn't have enough board experience. And you kind of caught in a catch-22. How do you get the experience if people don't give you an opportunity? And whilst I was regularly writing the papers for board and presenting at board, it just wasn't deemed enough. So my non-executive director journey to the boardroom started from having a structured approach to obtaining that exposure. So I became a social care charity trustee for Live Your Trust, which is an organisation that supports adults with learning disabilities. I then secured an NHS non-exec director role at Derbyshire Community Health Services, where I'm coming up to my 5th year now. And then more latterly, I became a NED for a local authority social enterprise, Futures, which focuses on keeping young people in education or employment. I was acutely aware that I needed provider experience because I'd been commissioning side within the NHS, and the NHS NED role, although not operational, it gave me some of that exposure in having that structured view of my career and what are the gaps that I need to fill. My NED journey really started during COVID, and it was only possible because suddenly I was saving 6 hours a week on commute time, which I then invested back into the NED roles. And I've talked to a number of women within my network who have talked about how their career took a whole different turn because of the working from home and being able to have more of a balance in the juggle of the work-life balance. I also still have my operational day job as a deputy QRN and Gem CSU, but what I've now found is that my NED roles allow me the space to influence and make a difference. And what started as a step to becoming an exec director has become a valued part of my career in its own right. I joke with my mentor that the breadth of the roles that I have gives me hands-on leadership 101 training that even an MBA might not have fulfilled. As Monique said earlier, I'm also the National Executive Co-Chair of the APNA NHS network. And our focus is on addressing health inequalities, workforce inequalities, policy influence, and celebrating South Asian achievements. For me, what helped me to get here was a mix of resilience, having a structured approach of what my gaps were, what am I trying to fill, what do I need to do more of, what do I need to do less of. The values-led leadership, a bit like Salma and Bimal have described earlier, staying true to my values and also learning from amazing leaders around me who are values-led. Mentorship from allies who reminded me of what I was capable of even when I didn't feel it. We all suffer from that imposter syndrome time to time, and having those people who are saying keep going really helps. And being willing to step into spaces where I was often the only one who looked like me. I also credit the strong women in my family for instilling this belief and drive from a really young age.
Yeah. And I can see, Asma, what you're sharing here, just so helpful and insightful about how you navigated that circle. You've got to be a NED to be a NED, right? That circular feedback that you get. I can see it's sparking off questions already that we'll come back to in a moment. But what I also wanted to bring today was, I've spoken about it before with you, a lot of colleagues don't realise that you can hold a senior operational role, whether that's in healthcare or in another industry, and also be a non-exec. So some people feel that non-exec roles may be only for people who have retired or for people who are running their own business and it's part of their portfolio. I think you're an absolutely wonderful working example of actually you can provide value, hold space there, and pursue that non-exec portfolio as well, whilst you are if you juggle your time the way you do. That's what I would add to that, I think. So thank you. So Sal, you okay? You're back with us. Okay, Sal. So it'd be great to hear. I asked you that question before about your journey into the boardroom. Can I flip the script there and say to you, you shared a little bit about what helped you to get there. What were the challenges for you? So what have been the challenges, particularly as you're here as our medic as well? So we've got a real breadth of executive experience on the panel today. But it'd be great to hear, what challenges did you face?
Yeah, for sure. And my apologies, I dropped off my laptop, decided
That's
to force
all
shut down. So
You came back,
right?
You came back seamlessly, just in time for your question.
Indeed, quite. No, great question. And I think, I think the challenges I've already kind of intimated in my kind of opening statement, which was, how do you balance trying to kind of do what you want to do, but also what you need to do? And, that kind of want and need, I think, is really kind of part of it. I think over the years, the challenges have changed. So, you go through okay, how do I get to all the technical skills? Because there is the technical ability that you need to have when you're kind of being a manager or a leader, and some of that exposure, or as I've put it, some of those real scars, those stories that you get from doing stuff and taking things on are really, really important. But also taking the time to actually understand what went well and what didn't go well, and being quite critical. The bit that I think the greatest challenge for me as an individual has been myself, right? And I say that because some of my own angst has been around my own patience and understanding about, yes, this is what I want to do, and this is where I aspire, this is my ambition. And I know roughly how I'm going to get there, but actually some of that due patience that I needed in terms of understanding, well, okay, this is where you need to get to, but actually what are those areas that you need to navigate? Because there is a bit of navigating going on. And I think there's three elements there for me that made the difference. There's something about really, really knowing yourself. So, what are your underlying values? What is important to you? What is it that you're going to down a ditch over? versus the sort of things that perhaps you might say, well, okay, that's important to me, but it's not as important because it doesn't always align to my own personal values. And I think taking that time to understand who you are, how you lead, your skills, the way you present yourself, all those things that kind of make you as an individual, right through to kind of your core values of who you are as a person, how you were brought up and things like that. I think the second element is, where are others with you on this journey? And by others, I mean your peers, your friends, your family, your network, because I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the direct and indirect impacts of the people around me, right? And I lean quite heavily into my kind of peers who I know I can go to. They're my kind of staunch that will give me some really direct advice, some direct feedback, whether I want to hear it or not, but also have been a real shoulder for me when I needed it. But the third dimension is that how do you take that critical review about self, others, and then someone who then helps you try and digest all of that into kind of your thinking. And for me, that was about finding the right coach, not just coaching, but finding the right coach, because actually it's all about fit. You've got to have someone who actually gets you. And then once they've got you and understand where you're getting to, can really help you navigate it. But think about it in that sense. For me, self, others, and facilitation. They're probably the three critical things that I found most useful.
Okay, thank you so much. And no surprise, Sal, how I know you. Really structured there in kind of taking us through that. And as I mentioned, you missed it, but it came up about authenticity. So actually what you were unpacking there, how do you show, why are you encouraging our audience today to say, actually that's your power. That's your power. That's your USP. That's what you bring to the table. Kind of know where you are in that is what I heard from you there. I'm going to jump around slightly with my questions. Don't get unsettled, please. Okay. But I can see we're getting a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So I want to make sure that we have some time for that. Asma, can I come back to you for a moment and just pick up on, you spoke obviously about your journey into the boardroom and the different board level roles that you held. So being a trustee and then coming into a non-exec role in the NHS. How are you holding your board accountable in tackling inequalities and discrimination?
So I think it starts with being clear that inclusion is everyone's business, not just the remit of the EDI leads or the BAME members of the board. In my NHS NED role, I actively scrutinise our understanding of health inequalities, spanning from disparity in access, experience, and outcomes. Do we as a board understand our gaps in order to be able to talk about how we address them? And not just does the board understand, but does each layer below that understand? Similarly, reviewing our workforce data to make sure that it's used to drive change and challenging any gaps in action, particularly, the climate in the NHS at the moment, recruitment, progression, disciplinary outcomes, and looking at the data of the workforce is really important. I'd say in all of my roles and organisations, I focus on representation at all levels. If we're not seeing change, I ask the difficult questions, are we just talking about EDI? Are we embedding it into decision making? Accountability is about moving from intent to impact, right? And it means ensuring that strategies translate into tangible, measurable outcomes. And what I'd also add is holding your board to account is not always the conversations that happen in the boardroom. It's not about banging a table in anger about the things that aren't happening, but the quiet one-to-one conversations, the sharing of lived experience, the listening and the learning, and that ripple effect of change via smaller, meaningful interactions. Every interaction for me is about education, educating each other, and then challenge at committee and challenge at board where the change isn't happening. So my top tip would be build those stakeholder relationships and your reputation so that when you speak, people listen to what you're saying. And I'm gonna say this, I'm very fortunate with the boards that I work with, particularly DCHS, where there's such EDI and parity is so high on the agenda of all the board members. It's never felt like a burden on me as a BAME member of the board.
And Asma, may I add a question to you? So in what you just said there about your board, where there's parity and there's a real priority and focus, I know that we were recently at the strategy summit, weren't we? And you were talking about your chair and CEO and how they walk the talk, right? So leading by example also. Did you proactively pursue a role at your trust? Did you know about them before that, or is it what you've learned as you started working with them?
So since I joined at DCHS, both the chair and the chief exec have changed. So the two in post now are relatively new, 2 years in. I was approached by DCHS because they wanted to proactively encourage BAME leaders to come and apply and go through a competitive process. But they were very clear that they needed more board diversity and they needed to create opportunities for individuals with potential, which I'm really grateful for. So I think the chair at the time had seen me in another NED interview process that he was supporting, and he got the HR lead to reach out and say, we're going out, please apply. But in terms of the chief exec and the chair now, absolutely amazing individuals who will actively reach out outside of the formal boardroom to say, is there anything we're missing here? Are we not capturing? Have we not got our eye in the right places?
Yeah, thank you. And that's so important for colleagues who are listening, when you are pursuing roles into senior leadership, really thinking about that value fit, isn't it? What's the values here? Is this more than lip service? Will my voice be heard? Is parity a focus? I really hear that here. Salma, may I come to you? And in relation to the flipping the script almost on this one. So in terms of what Asma was saying there about, when you're in the boardroom, almost navigate that space, do speak up, but also be tactical almost about getting to know your stakeholders. But being brave in the boardroom isn't only for board members. We have colleagues who need to come in and present and speak in the boardroom, particularly if they're aspiring to progress. But when you're in the boardroom, how do you support colleagues to be honest and to feel brave enough to speak up when they need to?
It's a great question, Monique. And, let's just start with saying that leadership happens at every level in our organisations. And where you've got an organisation where the board are consciously thinking about the tone that they're setting, the culture that they're setting, I think, backing people that speak truth to power or that are brave and bold enough to raise and name what the challenges are, but also are willing to be part of the solution. I think that the board has to visibly back that in a very open way. So just in terms of our board at SHSC, we start every board meeting, like many boards actually, with a real life story where we invite a service user, a carer, a family member, somebody from the community that we're partnering with, or a staff group to come and talk to us candidly and honestly before we start the public part of the meeting. Two reasons for that, really. One, so that the board can directly, and that's including the non-executive directors, directly hear real life stories and experiences of people on the receiving end of us as a trust. But the second is to create, I think, the tone, which is one of curiosity, of reflection, of holding multiple perspectives in that room at that time. And then we proceed as a board to reflect on the story and what we've heard. So really thinking about that deep listening. And then we take that conversation and many of those reflections into the conversation right through the board day. So all of our agenda items often come back to what it is that we've heard that morning, and we test and check and challenge. Are we considering that? Is it informing and shaping our decisions? What are the implications and consequences of that? And to be frank, my chair leads us through all of this. And at the end of the meeting, we often have a reflection. Well, in fact, every board meeting ends with a reflection on, was there any conscious, unconscious bias? Are there any potential unintended consequences to the decisions that we're making that we are now reflecting on and that might have come up? And a very open, frank conversation, including our values and have we lived them? Have there been moments when we haven't? And I think that helps, create a culture and set the tone for the whole organisation and the way in which we relate and do work. I think in terms of preparing people to come and present, I personally ensure that my executives and I have had good conversations in executive management team meetings through our one-to-ones, informally if we know there's a tricky issue that we need to take through board, so that they feel well prepared. The people that are coming from their teams to present are clear about expectations, that they've got some understanding of what to expect when to come into board. And I would expect my exec colleagues to talk to them perhaps about potential areas of questions that might come up so that they can be ready. And then I think feedback following that is so important. So really closing that loop on feedback. Feedback is such a gift, and I think using every opportunity to be able to do that. The final point I would make is that I think in my role as chief exec, I talked earlier about many of the things that have helped me navigate my career. I think a big part of brave and bold leadership has to be that you as a chief exec are willing to name what the challenges are, and to then create the spaces for people right across your organisation to connect into them, to be part of that solution, and actually then using them, I think, to go to the board to have that honest conversation, and you visibly backing them, I think, at that time when they're having a difficult conversation.
That last point there that you said, and what you said about feedback, Salma, because sometimes seniors work on the basis of a no news is good news, isn't it? Just to emphasize, people really value, isn't it, the richness of that feedback. What did I do well? Where are my points for improvement? Right. So really kind of reminded, because remember, we've got colleagues on the call today who are, they may not be in the boardroom, but they are responsible, aren't they? Like you said, we've got leaders at all levels. That advice that they've given here, and sharing how you do it in the boardroom, absolutely, people can take this as an example. When you are leading and chairing meetings, you can adopt that same approach and behavior. But actually, what I heard from you there as well, Salma, is how you enact this. Because it's very easy to say, isn't it? I support inclusion. We welcome diverse voices. But what you've just talked us through is how it happens in your boardroom. Really powerful. So for colleagues who are invited into the boardroom, maybe where you work, and if you don't experience this, if you feel brave enough, you may want to share with your board members. Actually, I've heard from another CEO how this works and what they do to actually bring this to life in terms of making, the boardroom a space where voices can really be heard. And I heard that question about the board challenging themselves, right? That's really crucial, isn't it? That challenge. So thank you for unpacking that. Sal, did you want to come in on that? I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah, I do actually, because I
Please
think
do.
what Salma just described, and I think what Asma was describing as well, which I think is really, so I think it's really important to me, but I think it's really important to leadership in the rounds, which is, where are you in terms of developing others? Part of my commitment and my passion around leadership, as I've already kind of inferred, is I wouldn't be where I was now if it wasn't for kind of both the kind of indirect and direct influences of others. But actually, as a leader, one of the things you do is develop others. And obviously that gives back. But more importantly, it really tests you out, because it makes you think. And I like that. I like the fact that actually recognizing that there is no one way. There's certainly not Sal's way, I can tell you that for sure. But there is most definitely ways of approaching things and ways of developing. And actually, when you do make time for others, A, you give back, but B, you get so much more in return as well. So for anyone who's on a journey, just really think about it. And my door is always open, both literally and metaphorically. But actually, I really value that, and I really enjoy that. And I think that was always going to be something that's important to me. But developing others and being there, for the good and the bad, is really, really key.
Building on, may I stay with you, Sal? May I stay with you? So let's continue on our point of bravery, and there's no pun intended, right, about what we're called here. But what you were just sort of saying there, that advice to others, but bravery often means knowing when to speak up and knowing when to step aside. So how do you make that call of when you can see you need to use your voice, or you need to kind of speak up and be that sponsor in the space, or when it's right to empower others and to kind of give them that confidence to sort of step up and lead? How do you sort of navigate that?
I'm going to be really honest. I think it's tricky, all right, because I think it is difficult, because sometimes there's an expectation. So if you're having a difficult conversation that is relating to, say, res data, and if you are one of the many or very few sat around the table who, is a person of color, for example, or in my case, as a gay man, someone who also has kind of, intersectionality, it's quite tricky to kind of know, well, actually, there is a bit of an expectation that you're automatically going to have a view. Whereas sometimes the real gift is not to say anything, but just to listen to the conversation in the rounds. Because by doing so, you get a much stronger idea of where it is that you can be most value adding. Now, for me personally, and if anyone who knows me will know that I find it quite difficult to keep quiet. Not that I'm overly opinionated, but I am an extrovert thinker. I am more likely to kind of think through my thinking or my thoughts just by talking. But actually being disciplined about listening is really, really key. But also then, how do you then influence those voices who you know have got views, but perhaps are less likely to kind of want to voice them? And I think I go back to what Salman was saying earlier on, and Asma for that matter, is where are those conversations happening out with of those formal, that formal kind of board environment? So not necessarily corridor conversations, but actually how are you making the time to get those voices and get those views from others that perhaps ordinarily aren't always heard? And that takes effort, that takes time, and that takes patience. And you need all three of those things to kind of make sure that you're capturing those views. Having said that, if you do feel strongly about something, say it. There is the clue in there, isn't there, about being brave. So I'll give you a real example. Conversation recently about some of the kind of cultural issues that we've had here in Airedale around kind of people of colour and how they've been perceived. And the great line of zero tolerance came out. And I said, I'm really sorry, but that's just not good enough. Zero tolerance is the sort of thing we talked about 10 years ago, where we kind of said, well, okay, we need a level. Actually, what I would be wanting is being anti-racist, because that goes even further. I don't think you can kind of put a blanket over these things these days. And actually, I was the only person to really say that actually what we should be talking about is being anti-racist. And that kind of raised some eyebrows. So you do sometimes have to kind of have that bravery to kind of go, there is a different objective to this here, and there's a different lens. But just having your mind where you're going to get that support from. So I've worked across West Yorkshire, and I have led and been directly involved with some of the anti-racism campaigns. So I know I speak the truth. It's not just a personal view, it's a collective view, because I've been there before. And whilst others may not recognize it, just kind of think through that when you are going to say something that is perhaps a little bit more being brave, just make sure that you have got the people behind you, or the kind of validity behind what you're saying, because the credibility behind what you say is so important.
Yes. And I can see colleagues commenting here about the anti-racist framework is there and is available. Even using the language of racism, we know that in some organisation that still causes deep discomfort in even using that. So as you say, that bravery, you as an executive leader kind of calling that out and say, this is where we should be heading to. This is what we need to be focusing on. Really important, but also brave for you too, right? So thank you for that, Sal. Bimal, may I come to you? So connecting the dots on some of what we've been talking about, and a lot of the questions that we're seeing in the chat today are sort of themed around that increase in representation. I want to ask you this question that I know, and I know from our conversations, when we talk about increasing representation at senior level, quite often we hear the comment of we can't find the diverse talent, or the talent doesn't apply for these roles. People don't come forward. What's your view on this, and what do you think we should be focusing on to increase representation at senior level?
So if I'm allowed to say this, it's a bit of a cop-out sometimes, isn't it, that there isn't enough diverse talent across the NHS, because we know that talent does exist. I reckon it's due to systematic kind of blind spots rather than the true absence of talent, in all honesty. I guess the real challenge is we don't have all the systems and processes and cultures haven't really been set up to recognize some of those things, to make those things, to allow it to thrive. I guess some things that I reckon we should do, and what I do in a lot of my teams, is kind of be proactive, not passive, in terms of discovering talent. So we talk about having talent pools, but actually, are there pools of people that and one or two individuals that you think can become the next chief exec, next CFO, and really nurture them into that role? And that doesn't happen enough for people with diverse backgrounds. This includes, we talked earlier about sponsorship, not just mentoring, but actually sponsoring somebody and saying this person is going to be the person that's going to be the next chief finance officer of a trust. I think we've done a lot to remove bias from recruitment processes, but sometimes it is a bit of lip service. So you sometimes just get a HR person on the side of an interview that is your equality lead. Actually, it needs to be ingrained in the person that makes decisions. And ultimately, who recruits a chief finance officer is the chief exec. So there needs to be representation at a chief exec level, because that's ultimately who makes the decision. I guess when we talk about pipelines in terms of who should we get some pipeline in early, we know there's a glass ceiling, especially when we do a lot of work in finance, in the finance world, around band 6 to 8As and 8Bs. There's absolutely a ceiling, and it's not just for ethnic minorities; it's also for women. That ceiling is there, and it does become underrepresentative and you can see it in the res data, and you can see it in any gender data as well. And I would say that sometimes there's a lack of just going for the job, because people feel that they're not quite ready, and people need that kind of sponsorship from people to say, actually, you know what, you're ready now. Why don't you apply? Let's talk you through. Let's show you how an interview goes. Sometimes the interview itself is quite daunting for people, so that could be another reason why people don't apply. But I do think people are ready and they just don't apply. I guess stuff like this is really important, where you've got people that are executives. The visibility of us is really important, so that people look like them are at an exec level, and it encourages people to apply. I know that because I can see it a lot more in London than some other parts of the country. So I'd say actually the visibility of us is really important, and things like this are really important as well.
For sure. Thank you so much, because you've given us both sides of the coin there. So actually that call out and challenge, where are we seeing lip service or tick boxing, where we've got someone who's from a diverse background on the panel? That means our panel's diverse. Well, no, it isn't. Like you said, if the chair of the panel's holding all the autonomy and they're not picking up on their bias or blind spots, it's not going to change anything. But also saying that those of you who are aspiring to progress, get access that sponsorship. Even what I would say here, because I can see some questions in the chat, I always say don't go for the jugular. And what I mean by that is you've got a panel here of 4 wonderful colleagues and leaders who I know, without putting them on the spot, will make time to have an informal conversation, a coffee chat with you. And you can tell from what they're saying here, you will learn so much in a 20-minute conversation from them. Ask for the informal chat. What people tend to do sometimes, not everyone, is, can you be my sponsor? Can you be my mentor? And people are at capacity. Ask for the informal conversation. See what you can get from that conversation first. It might really help you. And if you've got the clarity of what you need from some mentorship and sponsorship, of course, ask for it. What we are seeing now is more and more career accelerator programs and talent development programs that are including mentorship and sponsorship within the program. I'm actually delivering one for a large trust in London at the moment. And part of that program is they have in-house, so seniors from within the organization who are not from ethnically diverse backgrounds are the project and program sponsors within the program for the participants. And it's a really good model. I do understand not everyone can access that. Not every trust is running that. But it's understanding those different types of sponsorship. And as I said, don't be scared to ask for the informal chat. All right. Don't go for the jugular straight away. But if there is a great connection and people can help you, then I know all of you have scores of mentors knocking at your door. And one of the reasons why I hold this session is to try and open it up, so that for those of you who are here today, I hope some of this is some mentorship and career progression advice that you can all hear collectively as well. Okay. Now, I am very conscious that we've got a lot of questions. I've got one last question from me for Salma, and then I'm going to pause before I hand over to Nikki. And I'm asking this question, Salma, because I've seen a question in the chat that I think connects to this too. So the question for you, Salma, is how do you navigate the intersection of cultural expectations, professional ambition, and the systemic challenges that we've started to touch on? How have you achieved that?
Wow, what a question.
Sorry. Sorry.
Brilliant question, whoever's asked that. How do I navigate that? So I think it's a continuous act of balance, and in all honesty, incredibly challenging at times. So let's be really honest about that. I'm South Asian, I'm a woman, I'm a Muslim woman actually, and yet don't fit all the stereotypes of what a Muslim woman should or shouldn't be. So trying to transcend all of that and somehow hold on to my authentic self is a constant challenge. I come from a background where humility, being in service and community is highly valued. That doesn't always hold very well alongside a sense of ambition, is what I think many of us are led to believe. But what I've learned over the many years that I've been doing this is that actually they are mutually, they absolutely can live alongside each other, in that actually you can use your values, I think, to really think about what your ambition is. So if I'm in a very simple way, the way I would describe it is, ambition for me is about making things better. It's back to my purpose. And that, I think, is about living my values of being in public service and doing it with a level of humility that I don't have all the answers and solutions, no matter what role I've navigated, is absolutely at the core of the way in which I would do that. I guess the other bit that I would say is that having the confidence to be able to challenge expected norms or expectations of what a credible leader looks like is hard, and you can't do that by yourself, which is why we're back to the point. I think there's been a consistent theme in this room about build your allies, recognize who your mentors are. And I would say you need to have a trusted 3 people in the world that you can go to and really check and challenge. Is this just me? Or actually, is this a systemic issue out there that I'm having to try and navigate, and how best do I do that? And really having your champions that say, you can do this, you've got this, remember when you did X, Y, and Z. So very practical ways to do that, I think, particularly when I'm in a context where even in 2025, limits are set around what you can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do, and in which spaces you should be and shouldn't be. Believe it or not, that's a reality. And I think there is a space where I go where I get really frustrated about all of that, but actually it's about coming back out and navigating that with rooted values, clarity of purpose, recognizing and building the allyships around you. And I think ultimately, I mean, at SHSC, I'm really clear, I'm not in this on my own. I've got 2,600 colleagues who are in different parts of that journey, driving to make care the best it can be and fit for the future. And my job in that is to create the right conditions to really build the next generation of leaders and to spot the leaders wherever they are. And I think that gives me a sense of courage, I think, to continue to do what I'm doing. I hope that answers. It was a bit of a long-winded,
no, not at all.
complex question.
Not at all. And I think I can see from the comments in the chat about hearing that comment about actually challenging stereotypes. So that question about how do you navigate, how do you navigate? How do you still show up authentically? What about that point about when biases, biases are still there about accents, where people are from, etc. So just picking that up there, what you've covered in your response, I think has covered so much. I am going to pause myself for a minute, and I'm going to come to Nikki, because poor Nikki is holding a wealth of questions here. So Nikki, can I hand over to you to just bring in some of the audience Q&A, please?
Sure, Monique, thank you. And what an amazing conversation, some great nuggets, and the questions are flying in. So the first question is going to be for Asma, and this was an earlier question that was sent in before. So what shifts in governance or leadership culture do you think are essential to retain diverse talent, not just recruit it?
Really, really good question, and a really tough question as well. I think the real shift that needs to happen is being very conscious and intentional of the gaps that we have, conscious and intentional once we recruit these individuals from BAME backgrounds or minoritized communities. How do we put the support package around them to make them successful? It ties into a point I think Salma had made earlier around kind of the bravery to step into those difficult roles. But also once you're there needs to be support around the individual, so you're not the lone beacon who's holding the EDI flag and everything else that sits alongside it. I think some of the structural changes that need to happen is having recruitment processes that are very clear and proactive about seeking out a broader, diverse cohort of leadership, and holding to account when boards aren't providing the right support for those leaders that have made it through, or on demonstrating the values of true parity when people sit on these boards and in these leadership positions.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to fly through these questions because there are so many. The second one is for Salma. And this is, how do you decide what parts of yourself to bring into the room, especially when those spaces weren't built with people from ethnically diverse backgrounds in mind?
Great question. So I think going through my career, even when I was a nurse, because 30 odd years ago, you didn't have many mental health nurses that looked like me. And there were often spaces that I thought, I'm not sure I should be in here, or I don't belong in here. Over the years, I've learned to turn that around to say that, look, actually, I'm the first in here. So I'm entitled to be here because of everything that I bring, which is my professional knowledge and my personal insights and reflections, but also who I am and my lived experience. And I think one of the things that even as a chief executive, I try and do in my organisation is to really champion the power of lived experience, whatever that's in, whether it's mental health, learning disabilities, whether it's somebody from an ethnically diverse community, whatever the lived experience is. So I think for me, I think there's something about rise to the challenge and look for the person, the one person in that room that will give you eye contact and smile. That's your way in, one conversation at a time, one meeting at a time. And actually, the more unfamiliar spaces you're in, the more you start feeling comfortable. So I think there is something about unleashing ourselves in some of these spaces. And one of the things I often say to colleagues who ask me for, a quick chat or an informal chat, want to connect with me, is I think that's ultimately what brave leadership looks like. It's putting yourself in those places where your own inhibitions are that I shouldn't be here. Unlock your internal ceilings and then try and work through the structures that might exist there.
Thank you. Okay, this next one is for Bimal. So how have you managed the mental and emotional impact of career setbacks, especially when you weren't sure if the barriers were purely performance or competence based? And then a follow on from that is, and what advice would you give to others going through similar moments?
Thanks, Nikki. Good question. So I'm not going to lie and say I haven't had loads of setbacks. There are lots of setbacks in terms of a career. Usually when you're about to go for another job more than anything, and you feel like you're qualified, you feel like you've done everything that you possibly can, and yet the job doesn't come to you as one would expect it to. I think the thing that I have on my side, and I said this a bit earlier, I have a good network within the NHS, and I'm also someone that actually delivers what I said I'm going to deliver. So I have a lot of self-belief that I am ready, and a bit like what Sam said, you own it, and I certainly do. I generally am going prepared really well into a different role. But it can be quite daunting when there are setbacks, especially if I take an example of going through the interview process. If anyone's gone for an exec interview, it is a daunting process. It's hell at times, and the amount of work you have to do beforehand, and then when you don't get it, it's really, really upsetting. What I tell people that I mentor and is that you need to just think through that actually you've given it your best shot. It isn't that you weren't ready. It was just that somebody might have been better on the day, and to prepare a little bit more. I have felt sometimes that there's been it felt a bit like racism, because in terms of the people that have got the role ahead of me, so I'm not going to lie and say that hasn't felt that way. and I've not been shortlisted in certain interviews when I'm no one fully more experienced, because it's been for maybe a trust that's slightly more prestigious than another trust that isn't. So, and you do get that in the NHS. So you'll see that a lot. And I guess the thing is, I just keep persevering. I'm not going to let something like this bother me, and I'm going to continue. And that's what I stick to. And I know, and I think Salma said that the people around you is really important. So make sure you have those really close allies. Make sure you have the chief execs, especially if you're going for a CFO role, that they're going to be your allies, because they're going to be the people that will help you in your future.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to come to Sal, if that's okay. And this is a follow-on from some of the sponsorship questions. And someone asked, do you think shadowing can be of value in improving the diversity in leadership roles? So I know we talk about sponsorship, but what about shadowing?
I think,
Oh,
I think,
sorry, Sal, I can't hear you.
Oh,
There,
no. Right.
there we are. There you go. We're back.
All right, back in the room. So I think you take any opportunity with kind of what you're going to get from it, right? So I'm a realist, and I think if you feel that by shadowing as well as sponsoring, that it might open a door or it might make you see a slightly different perspective. I think if these opportunities come your way, then you need to kind of think quite hard. Why would you not do it? So maybe almost talk yourself out of it rather than talk yourself into it in that way. But I'm quite practical, and I can be a bit of a cynic at times. There are only so many hours in a day and there's so many days in a week, right? And some of what you need to do is to prioritize. And if someone that you know and trust sort of thinks, actually, you might get a slightly different perspective by shadowing versus say, sponsorship, then give it a go. The worst that could happen is that you've given it a go and it may not have worked for you. But actually, at least you're open-minded and you're willing to give it a try. But if you're not sure, ask someone, do you think it's worth it? Is it going to be worth my time? And I think there is something, what's really interesting about this conversation is you're getting a beautiful blend of folk that work within different environments and in different cultures, right? And I go back to what I said earlier, there is no one right way, right? Our paths may have crossed over time, but our journeys will look all very, very different. And sometimes you just need to be the master of your own journey.
Right. Thank you. And just to kind of follows on, Asma, there's a specific question around going into a NED role. Someone asked, would you need to start off as a trustee somewhere else, i.e. non-NHS or charity, before you can transition to a board role? What about natural progression? Because not everyone may be as brave as you.
So I think a lot of the charity trustee or school governor roles give you the exposure to governance and oversight and the skill set that you need as a critical friend for a NED. But what I'd say is don't limit yourself. Don't create an extra barrier that I must do a governor or a charity trustee role and do this as a volunteer and then it has to build. If you see NED roles that are in line with the skill set that you have, apply for them, particularly if you've got a connection to that local trust, apply for them. And if one of the setbacks you're getting is around the exposure and the experience, then go and have a look at the trustee roles. Just don't make that an extra hurdle that I need to spend 2 years doing this and then I have to move on. For me, the charity trustee role was something I hadn't considered until a recruiter inboxed me on LinkedIn, and it really aligned to my values around adults with learning disabilities. It was 10 minutes away from home, and so I went into it rather than it being a means to an end.
Thank you. Thanks. And staying in that kind of board area, Sal, this one's for you. And there was a conversation or response around kind of challenging board or so on, or, when you maybe write a paper or so on. And someone has said, how do we navigate this if we don't yet have a seat as exec or board? So if you're not quite there yet, how do you kind of check and challenge?
Is that for me rather than Sal?
Yes, Salma. Sorry, apologies,
I
Salma.
assumed it was. Yeah. Great question. So the question is, how do you navigate if you don't have a seat at the board and you're not invited to present? Yeah. So I think, I love Monique's strapline, be yourself, back yourself and make it happen. I mean, that is just absolutely, the mantra. And I would say to you all, if there's anything that you take away from today's conversation is that. So I would be saying, if you're not yet there, but you're aspiring to be a leader, then how are you backing your own journey? Where's your plan? Who have you tested that with? Is there a reciprocal mentoring programme in your system? South Yorkshire, we hold a reciprocal mentoring programme across the ICB where emergent leaders are matched up with established leaders. That helps you grow your network. It helps you become more visible. You might have that in your own organisation. Go and find out, make it your business, because you might be married up with an executive. The other thing I would say is part of your plan should be who in the executive team or senior leadership team do you really genuinely want to connect with, because there's something that you're working on or you would like to work on or you've got thoughts and views on that you could go and have a conversation with them about, and perhaps ask them about advice about how to get involved, how to support. In organisations, I'll say this again, leadership happens at every level. And the one thing that I'm always saying to everybody I meet is we need you to step up. You know, boards alone cannot make the difference that we need to build an NHS that's fit for the future. It will take all of us. So I think it's, what's your plan? How are you utilising whatever opportunities there are in your organisation, outside your organisation? What's your plan to connect with people so that you're more visible and that you're able to, you know, when you're on somebody's radar, they might be thinking, oh, who could be invited to this? Where are the diverse voices? And actually, your name might come up in that. So have a plan. You own it, back it. Make sure you've got a good mentor alongside you where you can prepare in advance for any conversations and you can debrief and just keep going in that way. The other thing I would say is that when you're involved in a project, there's no harm in saying, I know that you're going to present this to board. I'd love to come along. Can I just come along and watch and shadow? Most people will say yes. So that's the other thing. And the final point I'd say is, yeah, ask to go and mentor somebody, ask to sit in an EMT, ask to join the public board. I mean, anybody can go and join a public board. You can be a member of the public and join the board and watch the whole conversation. So lots of different ways of doing it.
Thank you, Salma. I have a question. I'm going to give this to Monique. Is the only answer to a manager who's blocking progress to leave and change jobs?
My answer in a nutshell would be yes, but. Okay, so yes, but. Why I say it in that way, because it's really important. We've heard some of our colleagues today on the panel talk about values, standing by your values, being authentic. We heard Bimal talk to us about when you get knockbacks, you know, kind of reloading and being able to go again, but also being aware when, okay, did I lose out because it was to someone better? Or actually, do I feel that there may have been some bias or discrimination at play here, right? The main thing is we spend a lot of our time at work, a hell of a lot of our time at work, and we cannot do our best work if we are working in spaces where we don't feel valued or we feel like there isn't a fit. The way I do things around here and the way you do things around here, I'm not talking about differences in what we bring to the table. I'm talking about culture and value fit. You know, the culture, the behaviors here are not in line with my integrity and how I want to work. I don't feel I'm being fairly recognized for the contribution I'm making. I don't see fairness around what I see around me. If you are seeing and feeling that all the time and you've tried to ask and work with your leaders to see a change in that, then it may be time to look for a team and for a leader where you feel that you do feel like you can show up and be who you are. You do feel like your best self and your best work is valued. Because when you look at words, I do an exercise when I do a session on being a more inclusive leader about feeling included and feeling excluded. And when you see the words, I ask people to think about the words that come up when they feel excluded. Those words can be quite often things like powerless, devalued, no voice, demotivated, sad. When I hear words like that, there is no way you can be thriving. There is no way. So there does come a time when you may have to think about, actually, if this isn't changing here, is it time for me to be proactive? And I think we heard also from colleagues about taking ownership of our careers. So no, I'm not asking anybody to go and hand your resignation letter in tomorrow. That's not quite what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is honestly, actually, I've been here for a while and it's not changing, then it might be about you going for where you're valued and doing your homework Because we spoke about that, didn't we? What are the cultures and values showing up in some of the organizations or jobs that we are seeing here, right? So what I mean by that is you can do your homework. We're mostly NHS here. So if I'm talking about sort of 8C and above, it's absolutely crucial that you do your homework, that you go and find out. If you don't know the leaders and the board, you do your homework, tap into your network, ask people, find out what is it really like there, because I will call it out. See invisible representation. You know, we can't be what we can't see. It's one thing. But how do you know? Just because the leaders look like you, how do you know if their values and their behavior and their focus is what you're looking for? This isn't just about representation by sight. Colleagues joining me here today are authentic, inclusive, and bloody good leaders, right? You deliver, you do the work time and time again. That's why I've invited them to and asked them to come and speak with us. It's not just because they are of South Asian heritage. And it's a really, really important point, okay? So please do your homework, tap into your network, talk to me. There are so many people who connect with me in these spaces. I'm so grateful. I usually know someone at a trust or at a local authority that I could put you in touch with, okay? But I can't emphasize it enough about doing your homework there, okay? Okay. So I have a couple of questions here left. Thank you, Mahmood, for calling out. Yes, Steve Forsyth talks about, he's got a really great term. You know, they say when you start a job, your first 100 days, people talk a lot, don't they, about your first 100 days. In Steve's interview, he talks about your first 100 days start from when you start to look for and are applying for jobs. Start your work from there. It's really powerful. I'll make sure we share the link to his episode. So I had one more question to ask all of you before I try and sum up and make sure we finish at 4:30. You've all given a wealth of advice today in what you've said, but if I could just say in less than a minute, what final advice would you give to our aspiring board members and senior leaders listening in the audience today? So if I could come to you first, Asma, and work my way around, what's those final nuggets that you want to share before we finish up?
I think there's a few things. Know your why, so that purpose is driving your career. Be reflective on your own strengths and weaknesses and work on that. Don't wait to feel ready. We all face imposter syndrome. I'm sure everyone on this call has at some point. So just hide it better. So go for the stretch targets. Find mentors and sponsors that will champion you and invest in you. And be open about your aspirations. Manifest it. Put out into the universe what it is you want. Talk about it in the workplace, and it happens. And lastly, I'm going to share something that my trust chair at DCHS, Julie Holder, reminds me of regularly, to continue to be brave in my differences. It's often your unique perspective, shaped by your culture, your lived experience, that is your greatest strength in the boardroom. So don't ever feel that you need to mute down your uniqueness. It's your special power, so embrace it and lean into it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And Salma, may I come to you? So what's those key points that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
I think building really on what Asma said, lead with your values. Be really clear about what you stand for and what matters to you, and particularly at times of challenge, really drill down on them. Leadership is ultimately about people, purpose, and impact. So stay grounded in that through your work and your leadership journeys. Second point, build your network, build your allies. This is a great way of creating connections. You know, follow up on them after this conversation. And finally, I would say, you know, be yourself unapologetically. There is only one of you on this earth. You do yourself best. And learn to lean into that is what I would say. But we need leaders who are bold, reflective, and deeply human. And if you bring that to your work, you'll make a real difference and you'll continue to improve lives as well.
Thank you so much, Salma. What you said there is really kind of bold, reflective, and deeply human. Let's really have that as a key takeaway. And Asma challenging us there, you know, kind of let's deal with your imposterism. Let's deal with it, right? Deal with it. Let's go for it. But I harbor that point because we're not hearing enough of this. Yeah, we're not hearing enough of this. We're seeing colleagues worrying that they need to show up in a particular way, you know, adopt a style of leadership that actually they know isn't the one that drives results or delivers the best care, but unfortunately, maybe what they're seeing a lot of around them. So it's really powerful to hear from yourselves as board members that reinforcement of that's got you to where you are today, and you are holding space and you are encouraging others to do that as well. Thank you for that. Sal, may I come to you? What's the last bit of magic you'd like to leave with us today?
So I'm not going to repeat. I'm going to try not to repeat what's been said already, which is quite difficult because actually both Asma and Sam have been right on the money, right? So I think there's two things that I would add, which is there is no one right way. So find your way, but be comfortable with your own discomfort, because you'll get lots of different bits of advice, right? And each one is a jewel in its own right. But go with the ones that mean the most to you, because actually they're the ones that ultimately speaking are going to help you navigate your journey. Be steadfast, so be tenacious, be brave. All right, you'll get knockbacks, and it will hurt. It will hurt. All right, and that's going to happen. But if you can become resilient to that and actually lean into your colleagues, lean into your networks, lean into your friends and your family, they will be there 100% behind you. Because if you believe it, they'll believe it too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sal. A real reality check there, right? About actually it will be hard, but that's why you've all spoken about building that network of support to help you. I always say we're here to help you be in a state of readiness to lead. So it's not to scare you, right? It's not to scare anyone, but actually to help you be equipped to lead well. So thank you for that. And last but absolutely not least, Bimal, what would you like to leave the audience with today?
And now I have nothing else to say. No. So what would I say? I'd say bring yourself to work. Own your own story. Bring yourself exactly to work as you are, because your culture, your background, your values, everything is what's got you there at the moment, and will be the thing that will get you further. Don't try and fit in, because you won't be your genuine self. I was going to say networking, but I think that's been already said quite a bit. But I would say that don't wait till you're 100% sure about going for a job. Try and go, and if you fail, it's okay. It really is, and actually you'll do better. You'll learn things. Every time I failed, I've learned something. So it's really that part of learning is really important. And I guess the last thing I'll probably say is just make sure that you're visible as well to everybody. So like we're visible, make sure you are visible to everybody. And like I said, own your own story. Just make sure you are visible to your network, to the organization that you're in. It really will hold you in good stead.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Really appreciate all of you sharing so much about yourselves, but also about that real core advice about progressing your career and acknowledging some of those challenges that we face because we are underrepresented. Asma, may I come back to you and just ask this final question before I talk about the APNA conference and finish us up for today? What role does APNA play in helping to shape safe spaces, confidence, and career progression?
So I think networks like APNA are critical in creating that psychologically safe space for individuals from minoritized communities to share lived experience without judgment, to be seen and heard. Often you can go through life feeling that this negative experience that's happened to you is somehow as a result of something you're not doing right. And I think sharing with others and seeing that this pattern in some of our experiences really helps. APNA NHS also offers mentoring, so really proud to say that we've supported 42 individuals into executive and non-executive roles over the last 3 years. And part of that is our members rising up to support each other. And for me personally, co-chairing APNA has deepened my understanding of structural barriers and also given me the platform to influence change. And in our own way, we all have that platform to influence change. And to give a shout out to some of the other networks doing big things in this way. So the CCOL group for BME NIDS, the NHS Muslim Women's Network, and also the She Network, which is a cross-sector network for women's empowerment. They all kind of remind us to challenge, don't they?
Yes. Yes, and please, Asma, all of the networks you've just named, I know we've got APNA on here. Please do send the links to us. Colleagues will want to have the links to join those networks, particularly She. It's brilliant what you're doing with She, really powerful, really needed. Yeah, so please, we will share those links with everyone. I'm going to say thank you to you, but don't go yet, panel. All right, I'm going to say thank you to you. I'm going to ask Nikki just to pop back up the slides for me. I've literally got 3 minutes, all right, to finish us up and just say a little bit about the APNA network, APNA conference, which is coming up in October. If you haven't been before, I deeply encourage you to come along, go along. There is so much, you know, the opportunity to network, of course, it's there, but also the opportunity to hear from the keynote speakers, to enjoy the space as well, be part of the awards. I'm assuming, Pam, I think if you're still on the call, it may be that nominations have closed already. If they haven't, do guide me on that. So there's an opportunity to still open, Pam said. So please have a look, scan this if you can scan this, if you've got your smartphone, you can get the booking form for the conference. We'll also be dropping the link into the chat today, but also in the follow-up email you'll receive from today, you will also have a link where you can connect with the APNA network and find out more, which is really important. You just heard the powerful stat from Asma there. Since APNA has been running their mentorship, 42 people progressing into exec and non-exec roles. You cannot tell me that that network is not having impact, okay? I see, thank you very much for putting the link in for the NHS Muslim Women's Network as well. Really important for colleagues to connect to networks where you feel you belong, you feel you are part of it. People will understand some of the cultural nuances, some of the limited beliefs that sometimes exist in our cultural norms. You'll get advice and support and guidance from colleagues who understand about how to move forward. And look, we're seeing here, APNA has been amazing so far. So just wanted to make sure you had information on the upcoming conference. Nikki, shall we click? Bravery in the Boardroom. We have a wealth of resources. The BITB Insights video report, you can access it on our YouTube channel. Particularly, I want to point out to the audience today, Chapter 5, A State of Readiness. I think it's about 12 minutes long. You will see some of our colleagues who you've seen on the panel today sharing their nuggets and advice as well in a short and sharp way. But this is 6 chapters. It's a video report, goes all the way from the case for change. Why do we need to see change? All the way through to building a network or a movement, which some of you are leading on now as well. We'll also share the link to the Bravery in the Boardroom podcast. Thank you, Mahmood, for plugging Steve Forsyth's episode. Bimal was my guest last week. His episode will be coming out later on this year. Please access the resources. They are free. Pam also is putting the links in there for APNA. Please get in touch with her. Pam has been a big advocate of Bravery in the Boardroom for me as well. I really appreciate the support. Nikki, shall we click? A big thank you to our panel. I'm sure I've seen all the comments in the chat, but I just want to extend my thanks for your support, for your contribution, for your honesty. So if we could all just really thank our panel here. I've seen the wonderful messages there. I really appreciate you giving us your time today. I know how busy you are and you've spared 90 minutes for us, and I really, really appreciate it. And I think we have one more slide before we go. Here we go. If you would like to scan this, all those bits and pieces that I told you are available. If you scan the QR code here before we finish up, you can also access them via this link. Remember what I said, all of this will come out to you. We'll be sending you the recording link, the links we've spoken about. And if there are any questions that we missed, we will also provide responses to those from the panel in our email. It is now 4:31 though. So I am going to say thank you so much for joining us today. I am going to close the meeting, okay? Wish you all a good evening, and hopefully I will see you again for the next Bravery in the Boardroom event. Bye, everybody. Take care. Thank you so much. See you later.